Look, you can decide for yourselves. You can even have some opinions. I can do a pretty decent job of painting the picture, even providing some nuance, and then you can decide for yourself what the landscape of college sports looks like in 5 years. You can decide and have an opinion on what you think the landscape of college sports looks like in 10 years, maybe even shorter than that. You could even break it down to probably 2-year increments. So, you can guess where it's going. The legal and political issues surrounding college sports should make your face hurt. It's complicated because it's complicated. It's made even more complicated because there are no rules. There's nothing concrete necessarily. So yes, your face should hurt. Yes, I also think most of you are sick of it and don't really even care. So I'll do a decent job of painting the picture so you can decide if you really care ultimately, although I think there's decent arguments to be made. And one of the best arguments that I've read is precisely something I've said for some time. So in the New York Times, there's a really good story on this today about this House ruling, blah, 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 name, image, and likeness, blah, blah, blah. And in there is a quote from a conference commissioner, not of the SEC and the Big Ten, I don't think. And he says, so if I'm paying an athlete $500,000 a year, do I still have to pay for all of his meals? See, this is what I've been telling you, that most people just don't seem to understand and don't want to understand. Everyone argues a college athlete needs to be able to get a job. It's not like they were not getting paid before. Do you know what a scholarship to SMU costs? Do you know how many 3 meals a day, really 4 or 5, because you get to eat whatever you want, whenever you want? Do you know what that costs? Do you know what the equipment costs? Do you know what the medical care costs? Do you know what the rehabilitation costs? Do you know what the training costs? I mean, to act as if you're not getting anything, all these other college students, most of whom belong in college, most of them, well, they're able to go get jobs. You're making more than they are. Your health care alone as a college athlete is probably 5 times as expensive of what some other college student earns delivering pizzas. So please put to rest this idea that somehow these college athletes get nothing. But where does it go in 5 years? So what has happened? And, a lot of people would say, well, this means this whole thing is now organized and everybody can move along. That's not going to be true either, because it's going to set up some really good questions. So issue number one, a court has ruled that college athletic departments, because they've been sued, you need to know the lawsuits are not going to slow down. They're going to pick up. To the extent that you have a class action lawsuit by high school athletes now saying, I want to get paid. So the idea that this is the end of that, I think, is wishful thinking. The lawyers have their grips on this, and they're not going to let go. The players are being told what to do, so they're going to do it, and the lawyers are going to dictate the terms. A court ruled, having been sued by current and former college athletes, that athletic departments across the country need to pay a little over $20 million per year to the athletes. I believe it increases about 10% per year over the next 10 years or so. They need to allocate that $20 million however they would like and to whomever they would like. There's not some court ruling that says you have to pay the backup tight end X amount. No, the court has said, college athletic programs, you're on the hook for $20 million to pay these athletes. You go figure it out how you want to prioritize that. Okay? So think about that. Think that one through. Because most programs cannot afford that, and they're going to try and probably have been coming up with ways to try to pass those costs along. So how best to manage that is a good question. Would you pay all of one sport? Would you give up on the expensive sport and pay for the less expensive sport? I mean, you can go down the list of all that. So that's this big issue that's out today that will fast track a glorified version of bankruptcy from many, many college programs. So I think this is Pete Thamel from the New York Times. This is only one of about 3 giant issues, and I can do a decent job of laying the 3 out. Then you decide what it looks like in 5 to 10 years.
Well, Jay, we should not overlook the historic nature of Friday night's settlement. It allows college athletes to be paid directly, revenue to be shared with them for the first time in the history of college sports. The athletes that have long been the engine of this billion-dollar industry are now going to formally get their share. That is significant. It should not be overlooked in all this. How it's all going to work pushing forward seems to be, from talking to people around college sports last night, a bit of a transfer of issues just into a new paradigm. Instead of worrying about illicit payments, people are now worried about, outside of the $20.5 million cap, how people are going to manage name, image, and likeness payments from there. So I think it'll be a new chaos. And the question of the settlement will be, will it settle down a landscape that has been chaotic? It's been called the Wild, Wild West, I'm sure you've heard, Jay, for a long time. Will a new rule structure, will a new governing structure bring a little bit of serenity and a little bit of peace to the college sports landscape?
I don't know. I think new chaos is more in line with what we're headed for.
No, the answer is no. It'll fast track bankruptcy, or that's not technically bankruptcy, but you'll need to decide. If you went to school somewhere and it's not a Texas, Oregon, SMU, or somewhere that doesn't have angel investors, then you got to decide if it's worth playing. I can't believe that it is. Good luck trying to pass those costs along to all of a sudden having a ticket price at Texas State versus UTSA that is 50% more than it is now, or 300% more than it is now. Good luck to you passing those costs along. So that's one thing. You have these lawsuits have been settled, and you have to now go pick out people to pay, athletes to pay this $20 million a year. You have to prioritize. And I don't know how you would do that. Best return on investment or worst ROI. So that's issue one. The other is the ruling created a mechanism, and it's not talked about enough because I don't think most people, since there's no rules about it, people really understand. The other mechanism is that out of this lawsuit, it supposedly created these are deals, name, image, and likeness, which I've told you a million times is not true. It's fake. It's not a thing. It was a court case years ago. Now it is just an excuse for wealthy people to give money to players. It's pay for play. That's what it's turned into. I've said all along, since the very first time this came out, I said these are not advertising deals. These are not business transactions outside of a few. There are some. This is a way for a rich person to get ownership and equity in a football or basketball program, or even softball in the case of Texas Tech. And then you can kind of control things, and you can pay them, and then the coach gets better players for it. That's not a name. That's not an advertising deal. So out of this settlement, that they did what I've been recommending all along, is they have an accounting firm that is going to be a so-called clearinghouse for these deals. In other words, what I've suggested for a long time, and that is there's no way, that giving that guy a Lamborghini is not because he's doing ads for Lamborghini. You just found a way to give him a Lamborghini and you're calling it something else. So this, in theory, this clearinghouse would decide if these deals are legit, if they're real business transactions. Now that's a big deal, and that would be a game changer if anybody followed the rule, if there was a rule. If there was a mechanism to punish them, because you know what will happen if you tell Texas or Michigan or Ohio State, you can't do that with that guy. They're going to say, up yours. Bring it. And you will back off because their lawyers or the players' lawyers will beat you down. So that's the sugar daddy part of this that, in fairness, they're trying to fix. This ruling is trying to fix that. There's just $1 billion question out there, and that is, and if you don't follow what this clearinghouse says, you're punished by whom? Who's going to get you? What are they going to do to you? So I doubt that people care enough to follow kind of this overwhelming chaos in college sports. But I'm going to stand by something I said some time ago, and that is that greed will eat this industry alive. It's in the process of eating it alive. They're well on their way. I'm pretty sure this increasingly means a non-competitive, mid-level and below program that is trying to hang on before, that is desperately going to try to hang on now financially. Eventually, it won't be worth playing football. It won't. Or any expensive sport. Hockey or, even probably baseball is probably one of the more expensive sports. It's just not going to be worth it. They're going to try, and they're going to try to pass those costs along. But non-money-making sports, which is 99% of them, are going to increasingly disappear. They can't hand out the $20 million. I mean, they may, for the next couple of years, they might find a way, but how are you going to make it back so you can play in that landscape? They're going to make a bunch of noise. What I think is the next interesting part of this is as the players disappear and those sports start to disappear, I think those athletes are going to make a lot of noise themselves, especially on the women's side. And I can't blame them for that. If you need another reason to care, and this I think is kind of a long picture, righteous way of looking at this, that ultimately Olympic sports, the Olympics in general, these non-football and basketball sports that have been part of college sports programs and Olympic programs for generations, those I think run the real risk of disappearing. And I think they run the real risk of turning into club sports, which, some might argue dollar for dollar is maybe not a bad idea. If you can't afford to play, then you shouldn't be playing. But I think it's pretty naive to say that if you had $20 million to allocate, you're going to still be funding, the 12th, 13th, and 14th member of the women's tennis team. So the training ground for a lot of these people is about to disappear. And I don't know how or what could fill that void. So keep those things in mind. And then the state of Texas has jumped in and I think strangely has said that you can't be paying high school players, which is now going on or supposed to go on in some places around the country, is that there's class action status by high school players that they too deserve whatever. When in doubt, just scream name, image, and likeness, even though you don't have anything. They're screaming for class action status. So keep that in mind, because all you're really trying to figure out is what does the landscape look like? If you don't have enforcement capability, okay, so you got $20 million's got to go out the door. Somebody somewhere in every single athletic department has said, we're on the hook in this lawsuit, okay? Judgment has been rendered against us, and we've got to go find the people who play sports that are going to get that 20 million plus. Okay? That's issue number one. That is, I wouldn't want that job. I mean, no, you wouldn't want that at all. And you can understand the noise that's going to be made, particularly by women, when somebody prioritizes it. Look, sorry, but we got to go put the money where we can get it back, and it's not you. Would you blame them for that? Will they sue? Yes. Would they lose? Probably. There's that issue. The other part that, if you're a big Texas fan, that circles back to you, paying out the $20 million is nothing to Texas. Nothing. Not a problem at all. Do it all day, every day. They probably won't lose a single athlete in any sport because they'll find a way to make the money. But even they have already announced that they're going to raise their ticket prices. Okay? So one of the fundamental economic issues of this whole thing is, at what point, what dollar amount can athletic departments, whether it's Texas, even they, at some point, you're going to say, you know what? You're raising a ticket price by 15%. It's 109 degrees and you're paying San Jose State. I'm out. When does the pass along cost run off the consumer altogether? Don't know. Most places are going to happen in a hurry. Somewhere like Texas, it may take a while, if at all. But the issue of the sugar daddy economics of this, it sounds nice. And even heard Pete Thamel saying, well, gosh, they're now going to step in. They're going to have a clearinghouse because the New York Times is reporting now, even though a lot of coaches say this is not true, that payrolls of $50 million are going to be the new norm. To win at the highest level, the Times says 40 to 50 million is going to be the going rate. The story was Ohio State was doing pay for play at 20 million last year. The story now is Texas is at 40. It'll end up at 60. And how many people can even have a chance to compete at that dollar amount? This is money given, handouts, angel investors, sugar daddies, whatever you want to call it. This is money that says, we want to win. We want those guys. Go give them this money. The vast majority of programs can't afford that game either, right? So programs are saying, listen, we've got to get some rules. And we can't afford either one of these forms, but we sure the heck can't pay out $20 million and then try to keep on hold of our best tight end from Texas or Oregon or SMU because they can pay him $1 million in a Lamborghini or whatever. We got no chance. And the answer is you've got no chance. So this ruling comes in with this clearinghouse, and that would solve a lot of the problems. There's one giant problem there. What's the rule? Like, what happens to you? I mean, do you really think that if so-and-so defensive back for Texas, like a lot of them, is driving a Lamborghini, and this clearinghouse says, by the way, routed out by whom? Who's going to rat them out? So somebody calls and says, hey, you got to look out. There's a whole parking lot of Lamborghinis at XYZ State School. Those aren't advertising deals. Okay. And then this clearinghouse meets somewhere and says, yeah, bud, you're not doing any ads. This is not a marketing deal. This is a handout. Give that back. No. Okay. School, make him give that back. No. What are you going to do to us? Oh, kick us off TV? Why don't you talk to ESPN about that? We're out. What are the rules? Like, what is the punishment? I mean, it's like telling your kid, if you don't stop, I'm taking away your phone. And you never take away their phone, right? That's what this is. We've met and we've decided we really don't want you handing out a huge amounts of cash unless they meet the criteria of an advertising deal. Or else what? We don't know. You just better stop it. Or else what? That's the next frontier. Right? Programs are saying, man, we think this is chaos. They're not following the rules, but we don't have any to follow. We don't even know what the punishment is. It's governed by, the whole thing is living on this borrowed time of some programs are too big and too powerful to be regulated. They're too big to fail. They're untouchable. And they're just a select few, but they're untouchable because nobody wants them to be off of TV because that would be a problem for all of them. So they're going to pay the players directly. Why aren't they employees would be a great question, because they don't want them to be employees because they don't want to introduce that concussion lawsuit. They don't want them to have collective bargaining rights. They want them to be 1099, whatever, contractors. So they're going to allocate that. And then you're going to hear a bunch of noise over the next month and a half. You're going to hear a bunch of noise over the next 5 years. And in the end, you'll probably have about 25 to 35 decent football programs and maybe 50 basketball programs. And maybe that's the way it should be. That's what the viewing public will get. If you're a high school athlete or going to be a college athlete and you're not among those 35 or not among those 50 and you're in a sport that doesn't make any money, the world's going to change, I think. I think the net result is you're not going to have a college to play at. And I don't know what form that takes. I mean, I don't think I'm making that up. I don't think that's doom and gloom. I think that's just a natural progression of this. You can't get funded, right? It's like the old days of the Olympics as, quote, amateurs. It was impossible to get funded. Imagine all these sports, all these athletes that don't have any mechanism to fund them. There. Where does it go 2 years? How does it look and sound 5 years? How does it look and sound, and who is left in 10 years?